Learning about the First Americans by Stephanie Segue. When an archaeologist begins to study a group of people, he or she hopes to answer some questions. When and where did these people live? What can we learn about how they lived? What kinds of artifacts or things people made in the past have they left behind? For many centuries, different groups of American Indians or Native Americans lived in what is now the United States. Nature always played an important part in their lives. We can learn how American Indians lived long ago from the knowledge that has been passed to American Indians today. More can be learned from the work of archaeologists. American Indians of the Eastern Woodlands. One of the major groups of the Eastern Woodlands were the Iroquois. The name Iroquois refers to the members of several American Indian groups. These groups included the Mohawk, the Seneca, the Onondaga, and the Oneida. The Iroquois were farmers who lived in the forests of the eastern woodlands. They used trees to build their villages, homes, and some of their tools. Iroquois villages were built on hills so that the villagers could see the enemy in case of an attack. Some villages were large and had a population of 1,000 people. A fence made of logs protected each village. The Iroquois lived in longhouses. A longhouse was about 20 feet wide and between 75 feet and 120 feet long. It was made of wooden poles covered with bark. Inside a longhouse were places to store things and places for families to live. In what is the present-day southeastern United States, American Indians lived in towns. Each town had three common features. A circular meeting house was where town leaders met. There was a town square where religious events took place, and there was a large court where games were played. The Creek, the Choctaw, and the Cherokee all lived in what is the present-day southeastern United States. They lived in plain rectangular houses. Houses were made from wood, and each had a roof made from straw or tall plants. The Seminole, originally part of the Creek, lived in Florida, where it was hot, humid, and swampy. They built small houses with open sides called chickees. The houses were built on platforms, so they did not flood during the rainy season. The Great Plains were home to many different groups of American Indians. Some Plains Indians stayed in one place. These groups, which included the Pawnee, the Omaha, and the Osage, lived in earth lodges. Their lodges were square, with a floor that was below ground level. Large wooden posts made the corners, thin poles were used for walls, and long poles formed the roof. Mats of woven grass covered the poles. An opening or smoke hole was left in the roof center. Starting at the base, the builders applied a coat of mud to the walls. The mud kept the house warm during the winters and cool during the summers. The Mandan and the Hidatsa lived in villages along the upper Missouri River in North Dakota. They built lodges made from earth and winter lodges near a large wood supply. The Mandan and the Hidatsa needed wood to make fires. Each earth lodge was very large. A lodge had a dome shape and could be 40 to 60 feet wide and 15 feet high. The roof was made of wooden beams and was covered with willows, grass, and sod. A family's belongings, including dogs and horses, were all kept inside the lodge. Horses were kept inside so they would not be stolen. Many American Indian groups of the Great Plains did not stay in one place. They were nomads who moved from place to place. The Sioux, the Cheyenne, the Comanche, the Blackfoot, and the Crow were all nomads. They hunted buffalo and followed the buffalo herds. Because groups of the Great Plains were always on the move, they needed dwellings that were easy to carry, so they designed the teepee. A teepee could be packed up and carried away easily. It had a cone-shaped frame made from long, tall poles that were tied together at the top. American Indians of the Desert Southwest. American Indians of the desert Southwest lived in a variety of dwellings. The early Mogollon and the Hohokam people built pit houses. These houses were partly underground. Each pit house was a rectangle with wooden poles that leaned in to support the roof. This created side walls that sloped. The roof and the walls were covered with branches, grass, and a thick layer of adobe or mud. American Indian cliff dwellings and pueblos are two finds made by archaeologists in the desert Southwest. Cliff dwellings were found in an area called Mesa Verde. A mesa is a hill with a flat top and steep sides. Mesa Verde is an area called the Four Corners. This is where the present-day borders of Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona meet. Here, the ancient Anasazi people built their homes in the steep sides of the mesa. Archaeologists call the people who lived in these places cliff dwellers. Some American Indian pueblos were like large apartment buildings. These great houses contain hundreds of rooms and underground chambers. Some of the largest and most famous great houses are in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. One called Pueblo Bonito has about 800 rooms. Archaeologists believe there was room for as many as 3,000 people in this great house. Art and other objects. Archaeologists also look for tools, weapons, clothing, pottery, and baskets. All of these things can help them learn more about ancient people. Tools and weapons can tell scientists how people hunted for food. From the size and weight of a weapon, scientists can tell how hunters used it. Before the Europeans arrived in North America, American Indian women made clothing from animal skins. They also decorated clothing with porcupine quills. Some dyed the quills before sewing them onto clothes. The Europeans brought new materials with them, including glass beads. American Indian women began to use fancy beadwork to decorate clothing. Often they created pictures of animals, such as thunderbirds. The buffalo was an important animal to American Indians of the Great Plains. It was a major source of food. Its skin was used to make both clothing and homes. Many American Indians were, and are, expert potters, basket makers, and weavers. Today, their objects are prized possessions of individuals in museums around the world. The National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., contains more than 800,000 objects. The objects are from North and South America and span 10,000 years of American Indian history. There is still much to learn about how American Indians lived long ago, and archaeologists continue to dig for answers. What archaeologists learn from artifacts and the histories passed on to American Indians today help us understand how American Indians lived long ago.